The funeral flowers had barely begun to wilt when the first call came. 2 weeks after we laid Helen to rest, I stood in the kitchen on a Thursday morning, staring at the rising steam from a mug I hadn't yet sipped. The dark green cup, chipped. Along the handle was a Father's Day gift from my granddaughter Emily years ago. Now it felt heavy, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone I no longer recognized. Everything seemed strange. My house, the reflection in the hallway mirror, even the sound of my own voice answering the endless calls from my children. "Dad, we need to talk about the house." Mark's tone carried that tight impatience I'd known since his teenage years, when he asked for money. But at 38, he wasn't asking anymore. I set the mug down, untouched. "Good morning to you too, Mark." "Don't start," he snapped. "Laura and I have been talking. This place is too big for you. The taxes, the upkeep, it isn't realistic. We've already found a buyer." "There's no mortgage," I replied. The words came out flat, factual. Helen and I had cleared the loan 6 years earlier, though I'd never told the kids. They assumed, and I had let them. Silence stretched before he gave a short, sharp laugh. Dismissive, the very one he inherited from me, though I'd never wielded it like a weapon. "Dad, please. Mom's pension hardly covered her prescriptions. We know you're struggling." I turned toward the kitchen window, looking out over the garden Helen and I had nurtured for 25 years. The rosemary leaned over the stone path, the lemon tree needed pruning, and every plant felt like a monument to what I'd lost. "You're worried about me? Is that it?" I asked. "I'm worried about what's practical," he said, each word clipped. "The money from the sale could be put to good use. Laura has Emily's tuition. And Laura and I tuned out her name. My mind already pictured Mark at the dining table, laptop open, columns on a spreadsheet glowing. Dad's house, sale price, proceeds, split. I knew the logic. I had taught him numbers when he was 8, counting change for the ice cream truck. Now he was calculating me. "You've been planning this," I said evenly. "That's called responsibility," he shot back. "We can't wait until something happens to you." The sentence hung raw and unpolished. "Until something happens to you. Thanks for your concern," I answered, voice flat as the lemon tree's shadow across the garden path. "I'll think about it." Then I ended the call before he could reduce my life into bullet points. The house fell quiet again, but the silence had changed. It was no longer grief's stillness. It was the pause before the next blow. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. My hands smelled faintly of the rosemary Helen used for Sunday roasts. She'd hand me sprigs as if they were trophies. "Fresh from the source," she'd say with a smile, though we both knew I'd only been watching her work. The phone rang again. "Laura, I thought about letting it go, but grief teaches you that avoiding things doesn't stop them from arriving." "Dad," she began, her voice a little too bright, the tone she used when trying to disguise bad news as something good. "Mark and I are on the same page. You think I should sell the house?" I finished for her. She faltered. "It's for the best. You could move in with us. We have the finished basement, full bath, separate entrance. Mark says we could add a kitchenette. You'd have your own space. It's perfect." Perfect. A word far too large for 4 underground walls. "And the money?" I asked. "Well, after the basement renovations, you could keep some aside. Help with Emily's tuition. Maybe even help Mark with his new place. It's all family, Dad. A win-win." Win-win. I heard the same cadence in her voice that I'd just heard in Mark's. Rehearsed. Decided. They had written the ending before inviting me to read it. "When was the last time you called just to talk, Laura?" I asked quietly. "That's not fair," she said. "I've been busy. Emily's a junior and work." "It's been 2 months," I cut in. 2 months since you phoned for anything else." The silence was thin and brittle. "You've been sending Emily money every month?" she finally blurted, like it was an accusation. "Yes," I said. $500 for 2 years. Another pause. "She doesn't need to know that," Laura replied quickly. Of course she didn't, because if Emily knew, she might question the version of her grandfather she'd been fed, the frail old man who couldn't manage his affairs and needed decisions made for him. "I need to go," I said, and this time I hung up before the words turned uglier. For a long moment I stood in the hallway. Morning light slanted through the windows, catching the dust on the console table. Helen's reading glasses still lay there, neatly folded on an unfinished paperback. I reached out, then stopped. Touching them felt like a step I wasn't ready for. My feet carried me into her study. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and her perfume, something floral and restrained that clung to the curtains. The desk sat as she had left it, a pen across a yellow legal pad, an envelope corner sticking from a pile of papers. I lowered myself into her chair, the leather worn smooth where her arms had rested. For the first time in 2 weeks, my shoulders eased. I pulled open the bottom left drawer, stiff from years of sticking. Inside were the usual remnants of life: old tax returns, appliance manuals, greeting cards. Beneath them, my hand found the edge of a pale blue folder, heavier than it looked. The papers inside shifted with a faint whisper, as if they'd been waiting for me. A yellow sticky note was stuck to the cover in Helen's neat block handwriting. "If you're reading this, you need to know what's inside." I didn't open it. Not yet. I set it on the desk, resting my palm against the cover as the late light warmed my face. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something besides grief. Not hope, at least not yet, but direction. When I finally unfolded the cover, the first things I saw were financial statements. Bank accounts I didn't recognize. None of the ones Helen and I had shared for decades, but separate ones, solely in her name. A small credit union from another county. An online bank she'd never mentioned. Each with modest balances, $8,400 here, $12,200 there. Not fortunes, but enough to raise questions about why they were kept apart. Beneath the bank records were property documents. My breath caught. A deed for a villa in the Algarve, purchased 10 years ago. The owner, Helen Margaret Hale. My name nowhere. The next page was a letter from a Lisbon law firm, dated last spring. It confirmed the property's value and offered to arrange a rental contract. At the bottom, Helen had scribbled in her hand, "Not yet. Keep private." The word stuck with me like grit in my shoe. There were more documents. Life insurance papers with signatures I didn't recognize. Policies, naming beneficiaries. I had expected to see Mark and Laura, but one detail cut through the pile. A newer, smaller policy with only one name attached. Emily. No mention of her parents. I sank back into Helen's chair. The faint scent of lemon polish rose sharply from the wood, mingling with the metallic tang that had crept into my mouth. Helen was never careless. If something was missing, it was intentional, not accidental. At the very back of the folder, a small envelope waited. Inside was a letter, dated 2 years earlier, written in Helen's elegant cursive. "Richard, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I guessed right, the calls have already begun. They won't come to you because they need you, but because they want what you've built. I've seen it in their words, their questions about money, the way they count what isn't theirs. You've always excused it. I stopped long ago. The house is yours. It stays yours. I paid it off so you'd never have to justify it to them. But I also know they'll try to convince you that you can't handle life alone. That's why there's a second plan. The villa in Portugal is for you, though it's not in your name. The instructions are in the back. Follow them if you need to vanish for a while. Sometimes the only way to win is by refusing to play." Her voice was in my head. Steady, calm, certain. I reached for the folder's back pocket and found a typed page. contacts for a Lisbon law office, the name of a caretaker, Anna, and a single key taped to the sheet. Next to the key was a note in Helen's hand. Trust Anna. She owes me her life. Long story. I let the page drop onto the desk. My pulse was steady, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I drifted through the house like a man walking in two timelines. The framed photo of Mark at his graduation, Laura's clay vase from college, Emily's crayon sketch of the garden. Everything suddenly felt like evidence in a case I hadn't realized I was building. In the kitchen, I caught myself staring at the spice rack Helen had arranged by height instead of alphabet. "It looks better this way," she'd always said. I never questioned it. How many small, deliberate choices had I overlooked? I poured a glass of water, standing at the sink as the late sunlight gilded the garden. I remembered the last talk Helen and I had about the kids before her illness. "They love you," I'd said, annoyed by how distant she'd been with Mark. "They love the version of me that helps them," she'd replied. "The version that says yes." I had dismissed it then as one of her darker moods. Now it came back like a warning I had ignored. That evening, Mark called. I let it ring. His voicemail was direct. "Dad, think about what I said. We can make this easy. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." Easy for him, maybe. An hour later, Laura texted, "We'll come by Saturday to talk. Bring Emily. It'll be good to see you. Bring Emily." As though I were the guest, not the one who lived here. I put the phone face down and returned to the study. The folder was still open. The policy naming Emily had been drawn up only last year, after Helen's diagnosis. That wasn't chance. That was choice. As night fell, I lit the desk lamp. Its glow caught a photograph tucked in the folder. Helen and Emily in the garden, both in straw hats, hands dirty with soil. Helen's arm was around her granddaughter, her smile free and unguarded. On the back, Helen had written, "Teach her how to keep what matters." I sat with that picture for a long time. The room was silent except for the slow tick of the old wall clock, the one Helen refused to replace, even when it lost time. I thought about calling Emily, telling her everything. But Helen's words were clear. If you need to disappear, not if you need to explain. Not yet. Near midnight, I locked the study door for the first time in years. The folder went into the bottom drawer of my desk, not Helen's. The villa key went into the hidden safe behind the bookcase. Only Helen and I knew about it. For a long moment I stood there, palm on the shelf, listening to the quiet house. In the silence, I could almost hear her voice. "You don't have to fight the way they expect." At dawn, I made coffee and actually drank it. At the kitchen table, I drew 2 columns. What they know and what they don't. The second list stretched, longer than I'd imagined. When the sun broke across the garden, I looked out at the lemon tree and thought of Portugal, of Anna, whoever she was, of leaving, not from fear but on my own terms. For the first time since Helen's funeral, something sharp cut through the grief. Not anger, but resolve. They thought I was an old man waiting at the cliff's edge, ready to be pushed. They didn't know I had already built a bridge. "Why didn't you mention that earlier?" Mark asked. "I didn't think I needed to," I replied. It was only a small fragment of truth, enough to unsettle them without exposing how deep the foundations really went. They lingered for another half hour, circling back to talk of logistics. But I let their words wash over me like wind moving through bare branches. Instead, I shifted the focus, asking about Emily's classes, Laura's new position, Mark's golf games. Their answers grew shorter and cooler with each question. At last, they rose to leave. Mark clasped my shoulder. "Just think about it, Dad. The buyer won't wait forever." "I'll think about it," I said, walking them to the door. Emily wrapped her arms around me one more time. "Bye, Grandpa. I'll come back soon." "Anytime, kiddo," I promised, and I meant it. When the SUV disappeared down the drive, I stood in the doorway, the cold air brushing against my face. Inside, silence pressed in again, but the house no longer felt empty. In Helen's study, I opened the blue folder and studied the photograph of her with Emily. Teach her to keep what matters, I thought. That was the real struggle. Not property, not deeds. The fight was to pass on the instinct never to release what is worth holding. And the first lesson would be quiet, invisible until the moment it was too late to counter. I picked up the phone and dialed the Lisbon number Helen had left. For me, a woman answered. "Anna speaking." "My name is Richard Hale," I said steady. "Helen Hale was my wife. She told me to call when the time came." There was a pause, then her warm, accented voice. "Then, Mr. Hale, we should meet. Soon." When I ended the call, her voice still echoed in my ear. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground shift. Not beneath me, but beneath them. They thought they were arranging the terms, yet the board had already been reset. Her voice stayed with me afterward, like the lingering warmth of someone kind who has just left a room. I set the phone face down on the kitchen sill and gazed out the window. The rosemary trembled in a wind I couldn't feel. The garden had become my metronome, rosemary to the left, lemon tree to the right, flagstones between them like a musical score I knew by heart. There's a steadiness to quiet growth, and if you pay attention, you can borrow it. On Helen's yellow legal pad, faint with the scent of her hand cream, I drew 3 columns. What they know, what they don't, what I want them to believe. That last column carried the most weight. Revenge, I reminded myself, isn't an explosion. It's a thermostat. You set the temperature where you want it, and let others mistake comfort for control. The first call after Anna wasn't to Mark or Laura. It was to an old number in my Rolodex. I hadn't dialed in more than a decade. Peter Alvarez, Estates and Trusts. Years ago, he'd handled a dispute when Helen's aunt passed, and a cousin came forward with opinions. Peter had the kind of presence I trusted. Precise, steady, allergic to theatrics. When his assistant patched me through, his voice was the same. "Richard, I'm sorry about Helen. Come in this afternoon. Bring whatever she left you." I heard the quiet click of him opening his calendar, and the sound steadied me more than coffee could. I slid the blue folder into my messenger bag. Documents. Within documents like tree rings, and locked the study. For the first time since the funeral, I pulled on a collared shirt. Grief makes sweatpants feel like armor, but armor has its time. Today, I wanted to look like a man who could still sign his name with a firm line. Peter's office occupied an old brick building that once housed a bank. You could tell by the vault door, preserved in the lobby as a reminder of when people placed their trust in steel instead of the cloud. His receptionist greeted me with kind eyes and offered water. I accepted out of respect for the ritual. Peter emerged in the same navy suit I remembered, a suit that seemed less like clothing than a permanent assumption. He didn't hug me, and I was grateful. We sat at a conference table the color of aged tobacco. I opened the folder and placed one document before him. The deed to the house, filed 6 years ago, in my name alone. Helen insisted, I said, my throat tightening. He nodded, lowering his glasses. She did it right. He tapped the margin with his pen. Quitclaim deed to your sole ownership. Notarized, recorded. No liens, no encumbrances. If anyone's promising a sale without your signature, they're selling smoke, he continued. We'll also revisit the trust we drafted. When Mark was barely growing a mustache, remember? We amended it 3 years ago. I recalled, faintly. Helen urging one more review while evening light fell across the porch. She removed the children as default beneficiaries to the real property, he explained, leaving it as a specific bequest to you. They inherit, only if you decide. The sole exception is a small life insurance policy designated for Emily. I nodded, admitting, That one mattered to her. Peter lifted a hand. Have either Mark or Laura attempted to act on your behalf? Signed? Anything as if they had authority? I didn't need the explanation. Power of attorney games. Entitlement in ink. Mark found a buyer, I said flatly. He even brought me a letter of intent. Peter's mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. Good. Then 2 points of law. First, without a valid current agency document, no one can bind you to anything. Second, even if such a document existed, you could revoke it immediately, and anyone proceeding afterward would do so at their own risk. He slid a template across the table. We'll customize this, address it to the realtor, the supposed buyer, anyone involved. It instructs them to stop representing you and directs all future communication in writing. Final, not angry. I read it quickly. The tone was exactly what I needed. And this, he said, placing another form behind it, is a notice of non-representation. It states clearly that you have not authorized anyone to act for you in the sale of your property, and that any claim otherwise is fraudulent. Copies will be filed with the county and sent certified mail. No one will be able to feign ignorance. The air in the room seemed a half-degree cooler, my own temperature falling into balance. Peter closed the deed, tucking it back into the folder with an unconscious gesture I remembered from long ago. Then he asked, "What else did she leave?" "Portugal," I answered. He raised a brow. Interest, not surprise, like a chess player noticing a pawn become a queen. I showed him the Lisbon letter, the caretaker's name, the key taped to the folder's pocket. I summarized first. A villa in the Algarve, title in Helen's name, instructions to trust Anna. Then the specific notes, typed details for the council, and Helen's handwriting. Keep private. Use only if necessary. Your life is not a negotiation. Peter leaned in. Your wife was a very smart woman. I only nodded. Truth doesn't need decoration. We'll contact the Lisbon firm for you, confirm your standing as surviving spouse, verify title and transfer if needed. Do you want this property kept discreet? Yes, I answered quicker than intended. Then we establish a holding structure, he continued, warming into the work. Lisbon Council will suggest the proper vehicle there. Here, we'll create a revocable trust under a name that draws no attention. Once title clears, the villa transfers into it. Correspondence runs through my office, no loose ends. I liked the way he said we. Some words are ropes thrown across water. 2 more safeguards, he added. First, freeze your credit at all bureaus, lifted only by you. Not because I think your children would misuse it. We both let that polite lie rest. But because strange things happen once word spreads that property is moving. Second, we review all accounts in Helen's name. If she meant them for you, and from what you've shown me, she did, we'll bring them over cleanly. Otherwise, we keep them exactly where she left them, by her design, and we do not offer information that no one has the right to know. Quietly, I said. Quietly, he repeated. Once the letters were signed, his assistant appeared, carrying envelopes already addressed, the barcode stickers visible at the edge. Watching those white rectangles slide across the table gave me more satisfaction than any speech I could have. Made to my son. The world respects paper. Paper respects procedure. When you cannot make people decent, you can at least make them cautious. Back at home, I placed the carbon copies in the bottom drawer of my desk, not Helen's. That distinction mattered. Her folder had led us here. My drawer determined what we would do with it. That afternoon, a voicemail arrived from Mark. Dad, call me back. Don't do anything rash. We're trying to make this easy. The word easy again, as if comfort were a leash. I let it remain unheard. An hour later, Laura sent a text. Dinner Tuesday. We'll bring takeout. You like that lemon chicken from Whitman's? I typed, sounds good. Didn't send it. Then typed it again. and did. Predictability is not victory. Victory comes from controlling the clock. Before closing, I drove to the post office and rented a P.O. box. The woman at the counter had the patient look of someone who had watched thousands fumble forms without ever learning. "Smallest size?" she asked. "Medium," I replied. "And an extra key." There is preparation that looks like paranoia, and there is preparation that looks like a plan. The key sat warm in my pocket as I walked out. A click in metal that translated in my mind as options. On the way home, I stopped at the cemetery. I hadn't returned since we buried Helen. It had never felt like a place where I could accomplish anything, but some conversations cannot be held elsewhere. Parking. Under the gnarled maple, I carried nothing. Her name carved into stone startled me the way a mirror does in poor lighting. I stood in my best shirt, saying nothing, letting the wind ripple through the field of flags in the veterans section, sounding like a low applause for those who showed up. When I finally spoke, my words weren't eloquent. "They think I'm soft," I said. "They think grief makes me pliable." The air did not answer, but the ground felt steady, and that was enough. "You did most of the hard part," I added softly. "Now I'll do the rest." By Monday morning, certified mail receipts began appearing in my tracking app one after another. Broker, buyer's agent, county recorder. A line of green check marks, nothing poetic about them, yet they felt like poetry. 2 hours later, a call came from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. "Mr. Hale, this is Greg, from Hawthorne Realty. There seems to be some confusion. Your son indicated—" I stopped playback. He had already said the part that mattered. After lunch, I called back, put the phone on speaker, and set it down. The little red recording dot glowing. "Because one day you always wish you had." "Mr. Hawthorne," I said, "there is no confusion. I own my home. Any future communication about listing or sale must be in writing, directed to my attorney. You already have his address. Do not come to my door again. Do not speak with my children about my property." He tried to sound conciliatory, but words pressed into the service of presumption carry their own stench. Of course. We only want what's best for your client." "Good day," I interrupted. I sent the audio file to Peter's office with a subject line so bland it could have been a traffic update. 12 minutes later, he replied, "Perfect. Log. There is a strange relief in having your life translated into administrative verbs." That afternoon I spoke with Anna. Her English had a melody I liked, and when she laughed, her voice skipped slightly on the second syllable. "You're Helen," she said. "She saved me once. I didn't ask how, yet. The people who truly deserve your trust will tell you when the time is right. The house is ready," she added, and I pictured white walls, blue shutters, though I hadn't seen them. "You come. I place fresh linens, lemons in a bowl. You will sleep." Sleep had become a luxury I had been stealing in coins. "Soon," I said. "I need a week." "I will wait," she answered. "Portugal waits well." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and bought a one-way, fully refundable ticket to Faro, with a connection through Newark, paid with a card Helen had once labeled, "In our budget as travel if we dare." I used the P.O. box for billing, printed nothing, and disabled my phone's location sharing. The last time I set up my grandson's console, I had been startled at how easily these devices betray us. I wasn't hiding. I was refusing to be found by those who never asked permission to look. That evening, I walked the house with a notebook. Not to inventory, but to listen. Objects speak if you let them. Mark's photo at 12 in his mismatched shirt whispered of impulses better left untold. Laura's college ceramics spoke of talent, yes, but also her craving for praise more than clay. Emily's crayon garden spoke to a future worth investing in. I placed sticky notes on boxes in the hall closet, not for shipping yet, but to calm myself with instructions written in my own hand. Not a bill to Laura. Careful to Emily later. The next morning at 9:03, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole stood the realtor again, this time with an older man beside him looking reluctant. I opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. "Certified letters," I said. "Meaning we don't need this dance." The older man lifted his hands. "I'm your son's attorney," he said. My lip twitched without my permission. He asked me to check on you. "Check," I repeated. "From there." I kept the chain intact. "You received my counsel's notice yesterday." The realtor chimed in, attempting geniality. "We thought perhaps you hadn't seen—" "I see fine," I answered. At 65 and still competent, there is a satisfaction in saying so without anger. "Leave a card." They did. I let them rest on the console table like two harmless moths, unless you forget moths eat fabric. At noon, Mark called. This time I picked up. It felt like a day for clarity. "Dad, what are you doing?" "No hello. Greg says you threatened legal action." "I promised it," I said. "Different verb." "You're being ridiculous," he snapped. "This buyer is real. This is a good number. We're trying to—" "Who is we?" I asked quietly. He inhaled hard. "Laura and I. Our families. You know what I mean." "I do," I said. And that's the problem. There was silence while he calculated his next move. "If you insist on making this difficult," he said finally, "we'll have to look at other options. Conservatorships exist for a reason." The words slipped into the line like glass into soup. I refused to let it cut me. "That's a serious claim," I said evenly. "Are you accusing me of incapacity?" "I'm saying," he softened, "we can't wait for you to start making mistakes." "I just made one," I said. "Answering this call. I'm not interested in being clever, only clear. Any further threats go to my attorney. We'll meet Thursday at my house, 2 o'clock. Bring your counsel. I'll have mine. We'll talk like adults, or not at all." He sputtered, then agreed. Bullies prefer a schedule if it lets them wear ties. When I hung up, I went to the study, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the blue folder. Inside was a small envelope I hadn't touched. On the front, Helen had written Independence. Inside lay a bank card and a typed slip, with her handwritten note beneath. "You hate allowances. Consider this a dare, not a gift. Use it to build a life, not to buy time." The audacity of her faith made my eyes ache. I placed the card where the light caught it. A reminder I had a spine. That evening, I changed the front door deadbolt. Not from fear, but because I like the feeling of a lock. That answers to me. I oiled hinges, tightened the banister screws, replaced smoke detector batteries. Work that seems small until the night it isn't. When the house sighed into quiet after honest labor, I poured a finger of scotch I had saved for an undefined celebration and sat at the kitchen table with nothing before me. The absence of paper felt like a decision. Sleep came clean for the first time in weeks. At dawn, a Lisbon number texted, "Senor Hale, we have prepared documents to establish you as sole heir of the property. Please confirm when you are ready for the courier." Signed with a name I didn't recognize, paper moving through the world while I slept. There are worse lullabies. I walked the block coatless, just breathing mist. Joyce, my older neighbor, waved from her porch, asking after me in a way that required no answer. On my return, a small cardboard package waited by the door. No return address, only my name in Mark's impatient handwriting. Inside lay a glossy brochure for a condo development. Smiling, bright-haired people posed near a pool. Beneath them ran a neat list of amenities, bullet points advertising granite countertops, a yoga studio, a shuttle to the mall. At the very top, a handwritten note. "Thought you'd like to look. Love, M." I gave a smile that showed no teeth and slid the glossy brochure beneath the Scotch bottle to steady its wobble. At least it had some use. Thursday came, wrapped in a sky the color of damp stone. Peter arrived 5 minutes early, which for him meant right on time. We met at the kitchen table, the same one where my children once announced that my life no longer suited me. He laid a yellow legal pad in front of him, wrote the date at the top, and the scratch of his pen was oddly reassuring. Mark appeared next, bringing with him a man he introduced as their attorney, Jeff. A moment later, Laura followed, bright-eyed, though weary. Emily wasn't with them. Her absence pressed on me like the sudden loss of light you hadn't realized you were using, until it vanished. No one extended a hand. Jeff opened with the tone of a lawyer who had earned his partnership by sounding reasonable in unreasonable rooms. "We're here in good faith," he said, "to discuss a way forward that honors everyone's interests." He spread his palms as though outlining an invisible table where possibility might sit. Peter answered by sliding a cease and desist letter across the very real table. "My client's interests are honored when his ownership is respected. This document confirms what your correspondents admitted yesterday. His home is not for sale, nor has he authorized anyone to solicit buyers. Any further attempt will be considered tortious interference, and you will be named." Mark's jaw shifted, but his tongue stayed still. Laura tried for a smile, more attempt than feeling. "Dad, we're just trying to think long-term." "So, am I?" I said. "And I began thinking long-term before you learned to drive." Her face flushed. Mark couldn't hold himself back any longer. He leaned forward, pressing his palms flat against the table. "Look, you can keep the house if that's what you want, but you can't expect us to carry the rest." "Carry what?" I asked, my voice soft. He blinked, caught by his own words. "The burden," he muttered. "The burden of my life?" I asked, still gently. "The burden of bills you don't pay? The burden of choices you don't make? Or is it the burden of not receiving what you already counted as yours?" His eyes darted toward Jeff, as if law might rescue him from language. It could not. Peter spoke into the silence. "There's also the matter of conservatorship threats." He didn't glance at Mark, which made the words fall heavier. "Those statements were recorded. If any petition is filed, we will submit evidence of competency and of attempted financial coercion." Laura covered her mouth. "We would never," she began, then faltered at the sound of her own voice. Mark's reply burned hotter. "That's not what I meant. I'm just tired of this." I nodded. "I understand. Being told no is exhausting. When you've practiced yes." Quiet settled. Then I pushed a sheet of paper toward them, a simple list written in my block letters. "Here is what I am doing on my timeline. I am not selling my home. If I choose to move, I'll tell you only after. The decision is final. I will continue to support Emily directly at my discretion. Any attempt to filter that support through intermediaries ends all support." Laura's eyes shimmered. Behind the careful calculation, there was still someone reachable by consequence. "Dad," she whispered, "please." "I am not your enemy," I said, the truth running all the way down to my feet. "But I am not a resource to be managed." Peter closed his pad. Jeff murmured something vague about time to digest. Mark rose without looking at me and stalked toward the door as though the house itself insulted him. Laura lingered, then turned at the threshold. "Do you have to be so cold?" "I don't," I said. "I choose to be clear." They had been gone barely 3 minutes when my phone buzzed with a Portuguese number. I stepped into the study and closed the door before answering. "Senor Hale," said a precise, friendly voice, "we've placed couriered documents in your post box, confirmation of your status, and a temporary letter of authorization for the caretaker to act on your instruction. We also included information your wife asked us to pass on only when you were ready. She was very careful." "Thank you," I said. My voice carried the sound of a man who knew what he would do next. It felt strange and good in my mouth. I stood a moment with my hand resting on Helen's chair, thumb tracing the place where years of her leaning had worn the leather smooth. Paper could not bring her back. Paper could not teach my children what she had tried to teach them, that wanting and deserving are not the same. But paper, thick enough and stamped by the right offices, could draw a boundary while I did the quieter work of living. On the way to the post office, I drove past the condo development from the brochure. The sign promised maintenance-free living. I laughed out loud. There is no such thing. Either you do the work yourself, or someone does it to you. I prefer the kind of work that leaves my knuckles scuffed and my name on the deed. The post office smelled of paper and patience. My key turned smooth in the lock. A yellow slip waited inside. Clerk has package. The woman with kind eyes handed me a flat envelope, heavy enough to tilt the day. Back in my truck, I slit it open with a thumbnail. Lisbon's stamps winked up at me. The first sheet confirmed, in black ink, that a white-walled house with blue shutters across the Atlantic was mine, recognized by 2 governments. Beneath it lay a letter for Anna, her name crisp in print. And at the bottom, a note in Helen's hand. A copy of a copy, but still steady. If you're holding this, you are not lost. You are choosing. I placed the envelope on the passenger seat. Her old place, and drove home slower than usual, as if speed might shake something loose I wanted to keep. The house greeted me, old and honest, asking for work and paying only in dignity. I thought of Portugal. Lemons in a bowl, a terrace where the sea carries its breath. I thought of Emily's drawings, Mark's jaw, Laura's eyes. Then, because plans mean little without action, I picked up my phone and sent Anna a message. Arriving, soon. Please prepare the house as you would for Helen. Her reply came at once. As you wish, Señor. I will set out fresh linens and cut lemons. We will wait for you. Some victories shout, mine would whisper. Paper sliding into files, keys turning in locks, footsteps on flagstone at dawn. I carried the Lisbon envelope inside and set it beside the blue folder on my desk. Past and future, stacked neatly, with the present balanced. Between them, I rested my hand on both. The house hushed around me, not with emptiness, but with expectation. The Lisbon envelope stayed on Helen's desk overnight, a lighthouse made of paper. I didn't need to open it again. Its existence alone altered the way the house sounded when I walked through it. Floorboards no longer creaked complaints. They spoke conversations. The furnace's rumble no longer signaled age. It pledged loyalty. A strange thing happens when you stop waiting to be told who you are. The objects that have always been with you finally speak. Morning came gray, the sky the color of dishwater, the cold sharp enough to make coffee taste decisive. I drank mine at the sink. The rosemary still trimmed as I'd left it. The lemon tree looked less like an accusation, more like a task. Helen had always said, "A life is built from the tasks you stop resenting." I rinsed the mug, set it upside down on the rack, and opened a legal pad at the kitchen table. This time the columns bore plain headings. What goes, what stays, what travels, what goes turned into something like a family portrait drawn by a court reporter. Shoes from the years when Mark thought Italian leather could replace consistency. The butcher block knife set Laura borrowed for Thanksgivings that kept expanding to include everyone except the cooks. Boxes of trophies, ribbons and plaques. The currencies of childhood, saved because the adult ones had proven less certain than advertised. What remained was mercifully brief. The table marked with the children's heights, books scattered with Helen's marginal notes like trails across a hidden forest, and the piano she never learned to play, but kept polished as though love could substitute for music. The list of what would leave was simpler than any I'd made since all of this began. the Lisbon envelope, one suitcase, the passports, and a single photograph. From the beach, the year we allowed ourselves to be young for more than a weekend. At 9:02 I called the movers. 9 on the dot felt like picking a fight, and 1/2 past would have been letting the fight pick me, Rodriguez answered. His voice carried the kind of steady patience that belongs to men who spend their lives lifting other people's worlds into trucks and still believe in returning calls. We spoke plainly. 2 deliveries, 2 addresses, 1 truck, 1 morning. When he asked if this was an estate clearance, I told him it was a correction. He gave a soft laugh, the kind that says he understood more than I said aloud. "Want them to sign?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "And sender. Richard Hale. Anything else?" "Just don't be late. Timing will do enough of the talking." He promised me a window between 7 and 9. I chose 7, as if the clock itself would listen. The rest of the day, I touched everything that would stay or go. Boxes have their own smell, dust mixed with ambition. I carried out the ones with the right shapes and sizes, and started in bedrooms that hadn't been lived in for 20 years, but still insisted on being called theirs. Mark's room first. The posters were gone, but pale rectangles on the wall showed where the bed had once shielded the paint from the sun. I packed his high school yearbooks, the baseball cards he swore would cover tuition, and the light blue tie I bought when he decided to be a man in a suit because some days the mirror wasn't proof enough. I found the letter I'd written for his 18th birthday, where I told him courage is mostly showing up when the story isn't about you. I read it again, folded it, and placed it on top of his trophies without a note. That letter would do its own work. Laura's room was different. Opening the closet made a sound like glass, remembering it was once sand. Scarves looped neatly around hangers, a shoebox labeled clay that held more newspaper than art, piano books from the 6 months she tried. To learn before realizing it isn't praise that keeps fingers moving. I wrapped the books in brown paper with the careful finality of someone closing a story. On top, I placed her 7th grade essay, the one where she wrote about wanting to be the person who brings something to the table. She hadn't meant money. Time rewrites us when we aren't watching. In the hallway closet, I uncovered Emily's Christmas ornaments, glitter-coated cardboard stars she insisted on keeping, even when glitter showed up in the butter dish. Those went on the what travels list. Some things aren't surrendered to lessons. As boxes filled, the house didn't feel empty, only honest. There's mercy in choosing what is yours to carry and what you must put down. By noon, I was at the hardware store, packing tape, Sharpies, screws for the side door latch. On the way out, an end cap of small safes caught my eye. Little black boxes with digital codes, promising more than they could deliver yet useful in a pinch. I bought one, not for money or jewelry, but for copies. Originals impress people. Copies protect you. Back home, I labeled each box like promises that didn't need witnesses. Mark, personal, return. Laura, piano books, return. Mark, trophies, return. Laura, clay box, return. The word return calmed me. When people decide you're a resource, sometimes the clearest answer is to hand back what they left. Neat handwriting can say more than a speech. At 3, I called Peter's office and told his assistant about the moving truck. It felt right to let one person on my side know. Fighting people whose Christmas photos still sit on your mantle is its own kind of loneliness. Paperwork isn't company, but it is a companion. Before we hung up, I asked for one more letter, just a plain memo declaring the house unlisted, not for sale, not under any transaction. A boring sentence, useful because boring makes people leave you alone. By late afternoon, the light carried that nickel tone of winter days that quit before you do. I wiped down the table where Helen and I once tallied taxes and tithes, small numbers that felt like proof we were still steering something. I set the Lisbon envelope down, took out Anna's letter, slid it into the safe, and then made 3 copies of my Portugal certificate, hiding them in 3 different places. the safe, the bottom drawer beneath appliance manuals, and a manila envelope under the car's spare tire. My father taught me, hide things where people are already tired. No one wants to lift a spare tire. Dinner was pasta, too salty. Helen used to say grief scrambles kitchen math. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter. A text came from Laura. Tuesday still stands. We can bring lemon chicken. I replied yes, with a smile I didn't feel. Sometimes letting them think they're part of the plan makes everyone polite, until it's time not to be. That night I slept on the couch in Helen's study, where the lemon oil outlasted her scent. The clock ticked, and I let it. At 4:52, I woke. Coffee, shower, clean shirt. I wrote 2 notes, one for Mark, one for Laura. Each said the same in different words. I'm returning what belongs to you. I'm keeping what belongs to me. The difference is not up for debate. I didn't sign with love or with anything. Names can demand. Today, I wanted statements. At 6:41, I turned on the porch light and watched frost steam from the grass like a promise kept. At 6:57, the moving truck arrived, a white cab with a trailer that made a rectangle of the morning. Rodriguez stepped, out in a jacket seasoned by winters and furniture. "Mr. Hale," he said, gripping my hand with the weight of someone who knew the line between a job and a favor. His men waited with dollies like horses waiting for reins. "You have the addresses?" I asked. "Briar Ridge first, then Pine Avenue." He tapped his pocket. "And the instructions?" "Deliver to the door. Ask for signatures. If they refuse, take photos. Time stamped, your name on the note." "Thank you," I said. He glanced inside. Not nosy, just the way craftsmen look at rooms they'll be judged by. "Anything else to take?" "Not today." They worked quickly. Boxes carried from rooms that had lied to themselves too long. The piano bench Laura had once scrawled her name under. Mark's old leather jacket, folded like an apology. The trophies, the tie, the shoebox, more newspaper than clay. I watched without hovering. Watch too close and men rush. Pretend not to care and something breaks. I stood where I could see everything without looking like I did. A father's trick. At 7:31, Rodriguez handed me the first receipt. I signed with neat letters, adding the addresses. The pen dragged just enough against the paper to feel like confirmation. When the truck doors closed, Rodriguez tipped his cap, a gesture borrowed from another decade, one that made this one seem less cheap. "We'll be careful," he said. "We'll be respectful." "Respect," I replied, "costs less than people think and buys more." He nodded, kept silent on whatever else he might have said, which was its own form of respect. They pulled away at 7:39. The streets swallowed their noise before the frost was gone. I poured another coffee and let the kitchen settle into its new shape. The house didn't feel emptier without the boxes. It felt clearer. I placed Mark's and Laura's notes in envelopes. Laura's I tucked into the box marked piano books, so she would read it before she reached the unfinished song. I slipped Mark's letter inside his jacket collar. A message found where the mouth rests leaves. Little room for denial. At 8:12, my phone buzzed. A photo from Rodriguez appeared. Mark's porch, boxes stacked on the mat, my note in my own handwriting, undeniable as a signature. The timestamps aligned neatly, unforgiving. Nothing else was written. Nothing had to be. 4 minutes later, another image. Laura bent over the piano bench, a box balanced on top, the storm door's reflection capturing a woman's outline, shaped like hesitation itself. The caption carried only a single check mark. I turned the phone face down and let the thought sink in. This is what happens when people are given precisely what they asked for, only to learn that desire and entitlement are not the same. I wiped. Down the counter where the boxes had rested, faint marks pressed into the wood as if cardboard had memorized the house's shape. Then I returned the Lisbon envelope to the safe, spun the dial, and listened for the click that confirmed the tumblers had honored my numbers. At 8:33, the doorbell rang. I knew whose knock it was before I looked. Mark's hand against a door always sounded like someone testing a wall. I left the chain latched and opened the door only as wide as a father's patience, meeting the same eyes I had once seen blinking awake on the day of his birth. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up his phone with the photo of his porch, brandished, like evidence instead of a snapshot. "That," I told him, "is your life being returned to you." He gave a sharp laugh. "So you think you're clever?" "Not clever," I said, "but awake." He pressed his palm against the door as though force could convince hinges to yield. "Open this." "I already did," I replied. "And I didn't. You had my childhood things delivered to my house? That's what this is?" "Petty, Dad." "I'd call it accurate," I said. "Your belongings belong with you." He muttered a curse under his breath, the kind of subdued profanity men use when they're unwilling to admit they aren't the men they want to be. "This is insane." "Insane," I answered evenly, "is signing a paper you refuse to read just because your son insists reading is pointless. Insane is being shoved into a basement apartment because strangers at a dinner I wasn't invited to decided I was a liability best managed with a kitchenette." His jaw clicked shut. The argument he had rehearsed that morning was already unraveling. He regrouped, unfolded a document worn from too many folds, the letter of intent. He shoved it through the crack, the paper bending against the chain. "This is a good offer. You're just being stubborn to prove something." "Some points are worth proving," I said. "Oh, so you can't be told what's best for you? Congratulations. Message received." His mouth pressed into a line I recognized from every game he lost as a boy. "Do you realize how selfish this is?" "Selfish," I repeated, not for clarity, but because an echo often forces a word into honesty. "We're trying to help you," he said, raising his voice now. Volume, the final refuge of a man out of arguments. "You and Laura had a buyer lined up before I finished breakfast," I said. He inhaled, trying for composure. "Where are you going?" "Inside," I replied. "You can call me at 2. I'll answer until 3. "Dad, 2 to 3, I said again, and closed the door softly. The chain tapped the frame like a period at the end of a sentence. He stood on the porch for the length of a wounded pride before retreating. His tires howled against the street, but the pavement ignored him. When his car vanished around the corner, the house exhaled, the way homes do when pressure leaves their walls. At 9:05, Laura called. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "Why are you sending things back?" "What belongs to you?" I said. "They're just boxes?" But Laura had never been able to say just without swallowing glass. "They're reminders," I told her. "You don't have to keep them. You can throw them away. That's part of it too. Please don't be cruel." "I'm not," I said, and knew it was true. "I'm being economical." Silence stretched long enough that I thought she had hung up, until she added, "Emily saw them. She asked why her piano books were on the porch. What do I tell her?" "Tell her they're hers," I said, "and that finishing something often takes longer than wanting to." "That's not fair." And there it was again, that word people. Reach for when reality refuses to match intent. "Fairness," I said, "is a conversation too long for today." I didn't hang up. I let the call end naturally, like a swing slowing when no one pushes it. When the line went quiet, the kitchen seemed larger. The clock in Helen's study ticked louder. Before noon, I drove to the bank. I transferred a modest sum from the grocery account Helen and I had once shared into the travel account tied to the card she had always called a dare. I left the rest untouched. There is wisdom in not making numbers dance just because you've discovered a new step. In line, I stood behind a man depositing cash with his hat in his hand, and ahead of a woman quarreling with a teller over a fee she had agreed to, but never read. The air smelled of worn carpet and counterfeit pens. I signed where I was told, kept my copy, valued only by me, and therefore priceless. At the post office, my box held a smaller envelope from Lisbon, my name written in ink that would not smear. I didn't open it. Not everything should be consumed. Hot. I slipped it into the glove compartment beside the car manual I no longer trusted to tell me the truth about oil lights. At home, I set the envelope beside its older sibling on the desk and stood with my palms braced on either side, fingers spread like a man gauging the dimensions of something he intends to build. The plan was no longer theoretical. The boxes had moved. People had carried away fragments of themselves they once assumed I would bear for them. The next steps would be quieter. Airline confirmations hidden where no one scanning a family plan could discover them. Utilities scheduled for a future without a forwarding address. Keys duplicated not because I feared being locked out, but because being locked in was the greater trap. At 1:59, the phone rang. Mark, punctual because even pride respects an appointment if it expects a reward. 2 to 3, I answered. He exhaled sharply. You've made your point. Not yet, I said. But I'm on schedule. What do you want? Finally, he asked a question. I want to live in my house until I decide not to. I want you to stop treating my refusal as temporary. I want your realtor to stop listing my address like inventory. And I want you to learn the difference between helping and controlling. He let the silence work for him then. And if I can't? Then you will, I said. Because the alternative is smaller than even you'd tolerate. Suspicion sharpened his voice. What does that mean? It means courts. Transcripts. Recordings that sound worse in front of a judge than they did in my kitchen. It means explaining why you threatened conservatorship for a man who can quote his mortgage payoff date and his annuity rate from memory. You recorded me? He snapped. I preserved a conversation, I said. Because one day everyone wishes they had. Neither of us raised or lowered our voices, but his certainty lost a layer. So what now? Now, I told him. We never discuss this house again. When you have something else, something not square footage, you call me on a Sunday after church and invite me for pie. Not because you think I need sugar, but because you want to hear about the garden. He scoffed, but not fully. Pie, I said. The kind that takes patience and pays you back slice by slice. We're done here. For now, I agreed, and let the call end, slow as a swing. In the quiet, I packed the single suitcase I trusted, socks molded to my feet, 2 shirts that didn't pretend I was younger, the shaving kit Helen had given me for our 20th anniversary because she liked sandalwood, her beach photo still warmer than sunlight, my passport, and the card she had called a dare. I left the suitcase open on the guest bed and went down to the garden. The rosemary had been cut back. The lemon tree would never stop asking for attention. I picked 3 lemons anyway, set them in a bowl on the counter, and wrote a note to myself on the legal pad. Lock the back door. Water the basil. Leave the keys with Joyce in an envelope marked mail. Practicalities are how men like me convince ourselves we're not dreaming when we finally do the thing we've been threatening for years. The doorbell rang again at 4:11. I knew those footsteps, lighter, quicker, belonging to someone still hoping a conversation might be steered away from sharp edges. Laura stood alone. I opened the door wide, because sometimes you give a person the dignity of access, even when you don't give them the thing they came for. On the porch, she held a box of piano books. A note lay on top like an unexpected sunburn. I can't. Take this, she said, lifting the box as proof. You already did, I answered. Tears gathered at the edges of her eyes the way weather gathers over a picnic. Don't do that, she whispered. Don't do what? Turn everything into a line that sounds good. Her voice broke. Just tell me what you want me to learn. She had been my daughter for 37 years. Yet this was the first time she asked that question without expecting my answer to become a ladder she could climb toward wherever she'd already decided to go. I exhaled through my nose, feeling something in my chest make room for what wasn't anger. Keep what's yours, I told her. Stop asking other people to store it. Don't confuse access with love. And if you want to be the one who brings something to the table, I nodded toward the box, then practice by carrying your own to the car. She blinked, surprised I recognized the origin of that line. But she tightened her grip, and to her credit, didn't ask for help down the steps. At the bottom, she turned. Are we going to see you? Yes, I said. When I decide, I'll tell you. And when I say Sunday and pie, I'll mean it, she half laughed, half cried. Pie, she echoed, as if the word could hold everything we'd failed to make of the others. Drive safe, I said, closing the door softly. The way you do, when you've learned that loud adds nothing but echoes. That evening, as the house folded into moth-colored light, the kind that makes a man honest, I walked the rooms once more. I touched the table where the tick marks measured height. I straightened Helen's photograph on the mantel, not because it was crooked, but because it made me feel useful to her one last time. I locked the front door, left the porch light on, and set the Lisbon envelope back on the desk, where it could shape the air while I slept. Tomorrow my children would wake with pieces of themselves scattered across their own floors instead of mine. Tomorrow I would buy lemons in a place where lemons didn't carry my grief. Tomorrow would be another day in a life I had chosen. For now it was enough to stand in my kitchen with clean counters, a bowl of fruit, and a plan that didn't need anyone's permission to be real. By Saturday the house had adjusted to my new quiet. Not the hush of morning, but the hush of a plan moved from paper into muscle. Boxes gone, table clear. The Lisbon envelope resting in the safe like a low ember. Steady, heat, no smoke. At 8:03 a.m., a text from Mark blinked on the screen. We're coming by at 10. Don't make this difficult. I typed nothing. Instead, I brewed coffee and watered the basil Helen had coaxed through 3 winters. Stubborn hope in a pot. I set lemons. In a bowl, Anna's message had made that ritual feel like practice. Then I sat at the kitchen table and wrote 3 lines on a legal pad. Breathe first. Ask questions they don't want to answer. Make them hear each other. The trick with family isn't volume, it's acoustics. At 9:59, Tires on Gravel announced their impatience. Mark's SUV always carried its weather with it. I opened the door before they could knock. He entered first, shoulders pitched forward, jaw clenched. Laura followed, cheeks pink from cold, lips pressed like they held something fragile enough to shatter if released. No Emily. Her absence entered like a draft. Morning, I said. We need to settle this. Mark didn't sit. He paced the rug's length like a farmer measuring a field for a fence taller than the deed allowed. Coffee? I offered because hospitality thrown into rehearsed hostility can strip a script from their hands. No, he snapped. Yes, please, Laura said, startling herself. I poured her a cup. She stared at the steam as if it held her next line. I settled into my chair and let it creak honestly. You said settle, Mark. That presumes a dispute. Let's be clear. What's yours? The house, he said, like 2 words could harden into law. You can't keep it. It isn't reasonable. There is no mortgage, I reminded. Repetition is sometimes obedience, sometimes a mirror. Taxes, maintenance, safety, he fired back. It's not sustainable. He leaned on the phrase like a handrail that had always held. Laura's voice softened. Dad, we're worried. About you falling. About you being alone. You're worried about the house being mine, I said. Not the same worry, Mark halted. We found another buyer. Stronger offer. Letter of intent. You had, I countered, sliding Peter's certified receipt across the table like a chess piece. Your buyer's been informed all contact goes through counsel. There will be no sale. "This is ridiculous," he hissed. "You're angry?" I said evenly. "Because I'm making you say what you want out loud." For a flicker, I saw the 7-year-old who hated the bat's weight, but hated more when I helped hold it. He pivoted. "If you won't be practical, we'll petition for conservatorship." Laura flinched. She hadn't known he'd drag that word back into the room. She set her cup down too carefully. "Then petition," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise all three of us. "Judges prefer facts over feelings. Bring evidence. We'll bring recordings." Mark's mouth opened, closed. He didn't like the sound of himself when he wasn't the one leading the call and response. Laura rushed in, desperate to soften the fall. "We don't want this. We want you safe. We want you close." "In the basement," I said. "In our home," she pleaded beneath her performance. "In your basement," I repeated. "Let's be precise." The silence stretched just long enough to make the next sound matter. I reached for my phone, set it in the center, tapped speaker. "We should include Emily," I said. "Any talk about tuition and my house belongs to her too." Laura's hand shot out. "Don't drag her into this." "She's already in it," I said. "She just doesn't know which part of the story is true." "She's in class," Mark muttered. "It's Saturday," I said, and dialed. The ringing swelled in the room, thick as breath nobody took. "Hi, Grandpa," Emily answered on the second ring, morning bright in her voice. "I was just about to call you." Mom said. "Hey, Em," I said gently, watching Laura's eyes fall. "Your mom and Uncle Mark are here. We're at my kitchen table on a speaker. I wanted us all to talk." "Oh." The vowel stretched, reshaped itself. "Okay, how's school?" I asked, knowing that starting with the non-essential often keeps bridges from burning before anyone crosses them. "Fine," she said. Then, still young enough to ask the plain question, "Why?" "No," I said. "Then why are we talking about it?" she asked. So clean, so simple. Laura's hand rose to her mouth, trying to stop a sound already escaped. "Because we're helping your grandpa think," Mark began. I raised a hand. He couldn't see it, but he felt it. "Emily, have you been getting my monthly transfers?" Silence. "The $500 since freshman year? On the second business day every month? To your account ending 3842? Her breath hitched in my kitchen, though she wasn't there. "Mom told me." "I thought that was them helping," she whispered. "I wanted you to have what you needed without asking," I said. "Books, dues, whatever made school less of a fight." Mark's palm slapped the table. "Dad, this is exactly why we needed to talk together," I finished, still not looking at him. On the other end, Emily made a sound, ugly, human, and heavy enough to tilt the whole room. "Mom?" she broke. Laura closed her eyes. Emily's voice weakened. "Mom?" She looked at me, pleading not to be forced to speak the truth. For once, I let silence be mercy, not a tool. I spoke softly into the phone. "My transfers total 12,000. 24 months, 500 at a time. Not everything, not nothing." Emily began to cry. Not the kind that waits for an audience, but the kind that spills out of you when a story cracks open and light rushes into a room that's been shut. "Too long. I'm sorry," she said, breathless, speaking to someone she thought she already knew. "Grandpa, why didn't you ever tell me?" "Your mother asked me not to," I answered. "She said it would complicate things." "Complicate who?" Emily pressed. "Complicate what?" No one could answer. To reply truthfully would have required reshaping ourselves. I turned to Laura, not in blame, but because the person who creates the silence should be the one to break it. She met my eyes like a student realizing the exam was not multiple choice. "I didn't want you to," she swallowed hard, "to feel like you owed him. I wanted you to think you wanted credit." Emily said through tears. Merciless, with the raw edge of truth. You wanted me to keep calling you a hero. Laura's face collapsed. Emily, no, baby. That's not. I wanted control, I said gently, because sometimes naming the thing devouring everyone's time is the only kindness left. Mark rose, restless, then sat again, unable to decide what to do with his height. This isn't how we handle things, he muttered to no one who could help him. You don't solve this on a phone call. You started it on a phone call, I reminded him. Not unkind. Emily sniffled. Grandpa, are you okay? I looked out at the lemon tree. A small winter bird settled on a branch like punctuation. I'm fine, Em. You don't sound fine. I sound decided, I told her. That's different. She inhaled sharply, ready to make her own decision in front of us all. I'm coming over. No, Laura blurted too quickly. Yes, I said, calm. But not today. Today, you go for a walk. You buy yourself something warm that doesn't come with a grade. Then you call me tomorrow when the noise in your head is quieter. She surprised me by listening. Okay, she whispered. I love you. I love you too, I replied, adding, and not for your report card, for your company. The line went silent. The room seemed to expand, now that truth had claimed the space it was owed. Laura pressed her palms against her eyes, as if darkness could rearrange the furniture. I didn't mean to. She stopped, because the rest of that sentence knew it was a lie. I thought if she knew, it would change the way she saw you. Or me. I wanted to protect your story, I said gently. You wanted to protect the version where you fix everything. Mark found his footing in anger again. It's the ground he trusts most. So this is the plan? Humiliate us? Make us the villains? Keep the house and your pride? You done? Yes, I said. With that part. Here's what comes next. I slid a sheet of paper across the table, handwritten in my own hand, the same list I had shown them with the lawyers. Because there is power in watching a man write down the rules he intends to follow. 1. I'm not selling my home. 2. I'm not moving into your basement. 3. I'll support Emily directly as I see fit. If that support is interfered with or misrepresented, it ends. Laura flinched at that last line as though it carried teeth. Please, she said. Just that word. It's always stronger when it arrives before the damage is done. I'm not your enemy, I told her, and left the sentence to land. Or not. Mark shoved his chair back so fast it bit the rug. He glared at the lemons as though they'd mocked him. Congrats! You win! This isn't a game, I said. Everything is, he shot back, striding to the door. Mark, I called. He stopped. When you talk to your realtor, tell him to stop sending letters to my porch. My porch is for people who know my first name. He left without replying. The silence closed behind him like a well-oiled door. Laura stayed. Her coffee had cooled into a mirror she didn't want to see. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. And for the first time, I believed her. She wasn't angling. She was tired. You won't, I said. Not today. Maybe not alone. She nodded faintly, as if agreeing with gravity. Dad, are you leaving? Yes, I said. Not today, and not for a basement. Her eyes searched my face for clues I refused to give. My plan required the privacy of silence. Will you tell me when? When I'm ready, I said. And when I do, it won't be a negotiation. The wind lifted outside. The lemon tree shivered against the glass like a hand. Can I bring Emily tomorrow? She asked. Yes. But you leave money at the door. We talk like people who love each other, not like accountants. A small smile flickered on her mouth. Pie, she said, testing the word like a dress she wasn't sure she could afford. Pie, I agreed. Sunday. After she left, I exhaled. I washed the cups slowly, listening to how ceramic changes its sound once coffee leaves it. I dried them and set them back where Helen had once placed them. The quiet discipline of returning things to their chosen place felt like prayer. At noon, a new voicemail. The realtor again, an apology shaped like a threat. "We didn't mean to cause stress, Mr. Hale, but if you reconsider this market—" I deleted it. Peter texted. "All notices delivered. No further contact except written. Good work today." I set the phone face down. Not to avoid the world, but to give this house the respect of my undivided presence. I walked the rooms slowly. Helen's study. The chair shaped by her elbows. The legal pad with my morning's list. I added one more line at the bottom, 4. Choose when to leave. Leave like a gentleman. Not an escape cloaked in shame, but a departure announced with dignity. That afternoon I called Anna. She picked up on the second ring, the way people do when they mean what they say about being available. "Soon," I said. "I'll open the windows," she replied, as if that were the most important task in the world. Maybe it was. "Fresh linens," I added, turning the picture in my mind from watercolor to oil. "And lemons," she said. "Always lemons." We hung up without ceremony. Grief teaches you that large feelings don't require large performances. Twilight pressed its forehead to the glass. I set out 2 plates, cooked a small dinner for one, and ate slowly, not because the food deserved reverence, but because my life did. The TV stayed dark. The clock ticked in honest seconds. I sat with Helen's note open inside the blue folder. If you're reading this, then you need to know what's inside. I laid my hand on it like a benediction. Thank you. I didn't say it aloud. Some gratitude belongs between skin and wood. Before bed, I wrote 2 emails. One to Peter. I'd be unreachable for a few days midweek. He would handle all communications with the council. The other to Joyce next door. Would she collect the mail and water the basil if the week turned dry? I left the spare keys in an envelope marked Joyce. Mail and basil, tucked in the drawer by the front door. Practicality is the bow tied on clarity. In the dark, I lay awake long enough to hear the house settle. A tick in the vent. The sigh the east wall makes when the air cools. Outside, a fox threaded the yards like rumor. I thought of Emily's voice breaking. I thought of Laura's question. What do you want me to learn? I thought of Mark's jaw and how a man can wear it like armor and still be undone by a single quiet sentence. When sleep finally came, it wasn't bargained for. It was a right. Morning would bring pie, sundae, and maybe a conversation where a girl became a woman by telling herself the truth in front of people who loved her. Soon after would come a ticket, a bag, a door closing behind me. Not leaving, arriving for, now, the bowl of lemons, the pad with 4 lines, and a house that had already made space for the next chapter without needing to watch me write it. Mark had always carried himself as though the world would bend if he leaned hard enough. That wasn't discipline nor skill. It was the confidence of a man who had never faced the true cost of failure. Helen and I had made sure of that. But in my kitchen I could see the fabric beginning to fray. A missed truck payment notice. A reminder call from the golf club about 2 months overdue dues. I didn't need to unravel those threads. I only had to stop holding them together. 2 weeks earlier, I had quietly closed a joint account Helen once opened in both our names. An account Mark hadn't even known existed until recently. He believed no one paid close attention to the account, but I knew better. He used it as his personal bridge between shortages, hundreds here, 1,000 there, always followed by the same tired assurance that he would repay it. I never pressed the matter. Helen had been firm. "Let it go. It's only money," she said, it often brushing aside my objections. But money carries a weight words cannot. It teaches differently, more ruthlessly. When Mark finally noticed the account was empty, he didn't come to me. He phoned Laura. And Laura, with her usual skill at smoothing sharp edges when it served her, called me. "Dad?" she began, her voice taut. "Mark's upset. That account wasn't yours to use." I didn't answer at once. She hesitated, then softened her tone, trying persuasion. "He's under so much pressure. The market's terrible right now. If you could just help him through the next few months." It was uncanny hearing Helen's cadence in her daughter's voice, the way Helen sounded when she wanted me to yield during an argument, but Laura's version was thinner, practiced rather than natural. "Laura," I said evenly, "pressure isn't the enemy. It keeps the pipes from freezing." She fell silent, probably weighing what I meant. She wouldn't understand yet. Meanwhile, Graham had been working. He discovered that a property Helen and I had once co-owned with a friend, the very one Mark assumed would default to him, was bound by a hidden clause in its partnership agreement. If one partner sold, the other held the first right of refusal. Graham arranged for me alone to exercise that right. Then we quietly sold my share for cash. By the time Mark discovered it, the deal was done. The proceeds became something else entirely. A locked drawer in Helen's desk containing municipal bonds in Emily's name. Only Graham and I knew. Not Mark, not Laura, and certainly not the entourage Mark liked to keep when he was performing. Importance. One afternoon, Mark arrived without notice. His truck idled in the driveway as he lingered on the porch, restless. I let the bell ring twice before I opened the door. "Dad, we need to talk." He stepped inside without waiting to be asked, scanning the rooms as though bundles of cash might be lying around. "You closed the account," he said. "Yes. You know you left me in a bind." "I do." His jaw tensed. "I thought after Mom that you'd just inherit a blank check." I let the statement hang. He deflated, slumping into a kitchen chair. "You don't understand what it's like right now. Costs climbing, jobs shrinking. I've got obligations." "So do I," I replied. We sat in silence, the refrigerator humming between us. He left, without shaking my hand. Days later, Laura's catering business lost its largest corporate client. Officially, the company decided to bring services in-house. Unofficially, Graham overheard during a Chamber of Commerce lunch that a quieter, more reliable caterer had been recommended by someone with influence in the right places. Influence I had cultivated carefully over years. I didn't rejoice. It wasn't revenge, not in the way people imagine. No gloating, no triumph, only the quiet steadiness of balance being restored. For too long, they'd treated me as an endless tap, water on demand. Now the spigot was gone, and they were left staring at the dry faucet. Emily visited that Saturday. She never mentioned. Her parents and I didn't either. We spent the afternoon trimming rosemary, gathering lemons for Helen's pie recipe. She asked me to show her how to repair the shed's loose hinge. She mastered it quickly. "You've got a steady hand," I told her. "Must run in the family," she said with a grin. When she hugged me goodbye, it was tighter than usual. I almost told her about the bonds, the sales, the whole plan. Almost, but it wasn't her burden yet. The next move was about showing Mark and Laura what life looked like without a net. And the thing about nets is, most people never realize they're there until they're gone. The unraveling had begun, and I had nothing but time to let it run. Airports are built to remind you that you're replaceable. That's their efficiency, their cruelty, their mercy. Thousands of bodies aligned to one clock, each of us reduced to shoes in a plastic bin. Newark smelled of pretzels and disinfectant. The gate agent smiled the flat smile of an assembly line. I handed over my passport, the scanner validating that I existed. On the plane, I chose the aisle. Helen had loved the window, the neat grid of fields, rivers braided like hair you hesitate to cut. Alone, the aisle felt truer. The small mercy of standing when your blood insists. I didn't speak to the man beside me. He had the eager look of someone ready to announce his itinerary to a stranger, seeking validation. We nodded, and he blessed us both by opening a book. I closed my eyes and tried on The Shape of Sleep. Somewhere in the hush over the Atlantic, the plane became a congregation. We knew nothing of the pilot's heartbeat, of Winter's designs at this altitude, of why the engines persisted. And still, they did. That's faith on a schedule. I thought of Emily at the kitchen table, of Laura's box of piano books, of Mark's fists against my door. I thought of Helen's tidy handwriting on sticky notes she trusted me to read. When the attendant asked about breakfast, I declined. She leaned closer anyway, set down coffee. "You look like a man who drinks it," she said gently. She was right. It was bitter, and it helped. Portugal arrived beneath us like a mosaic. White squares, blue shards, a pattern you could live inside. The runway was a promise carried out by tires that gripped certainty. The plane exhaled. So did I. Customs was a chorus of patience in many languages. When my turn came, the officer stamped my passport and said, "Bem-vindo," welcome, printed into paper, proof that I had crossed something unseen and been permitted through. Outside, the Algarve air met me like a good handshake. Cool at first, then warm. A woman waited with my name in block letters. Compact frame, hair tied low, navy sweater. When our eyes met, her expression reshaped, less like a smile, more like finding what she hadn't realized was lost. "Senor Hale." "Ours," she said. "Anna," I answered. She embraced me without hesitation, her shoulder carrying the scent of oranges and clean laundry. "Your Helen," she said softly, "would be angry if I hadn't welcomed you this way." Angry and Helen in the same sentence made me laugh. "She'd pretend to be," I said. Then later she'd admit it like a prayer. Anna nodded as though she'd been in our kitchen when those rituals were invented. "Come," she said, leading me to a small gray car, the color of a rain cloud that thinks better of raining. We drove quietly, the road offering low hills, wide, sky. White houses scattered like deliberate thoughts. Now and then a ruin kept its form, less from strength than respect. Anna pointed when it mattered. A bakery, a pharmacy. "You won't need it," she said. "But it's good to know," as the pavement narrowed. She slowed. "Olive trees," she murmured, as though introducing me to old friends. We turned into a lane with stone walls, the height of boundaries worth keeping. Bougainvilleas spilled over them, purple enough to excuse extravagance. She parked with calm certainty. "Home," she said, sharing it rather than asking if I agreed. The house was smaller than the one I'd left in America, larger than the one I'd tried to shrink. White walls, blue shutters that made light truthful, a red-tiled roof that had learned silence in storms. It wasn't a showpiece. It was a place, asked to be a place, and it had answered yes. Anna pressed a brass key into my hand, heavy for its size, warm from her pocket. "This is yours," she said. "By law, and by what matters." I didn't thank her, not yet. Some thanks are best kept until you can spend them. Inside, the floor was cool beneath my shoes. The living room opened into light without hesitation. A sand-colored couch, a wooden table with 4 chairs that meant 4 people could sit and mean it. Shelves ready for books. A kitchen tiled in blues that echoed the sea's ideas. Copper pots hung above the stove, turning work into art and art into work. On the counter, a bowl of lemons sat as if they knew their purpose. Anna moved through the rooms with the quiet grace of a host. Not for display, but to make recognition easier. "Linens," she said, pointing toward a closet that smelled of sunlight. "New mattress," she added, pressing the edge of a bed that seemed to forgive all who had already slept there. "Windows," she continued, opening one so the air could behave honestly when invited. Beyond the kitchen, a small stone terrace waited. Its iron rail, painted the kind of blue only patience produces, framed the Mediterranean. The sea spoke its old language, endless phrases repeated for listeners and non-listeners alike. I stood still and understood without study. Keep moving. Keep changing. Keep showing up. Anna rested her palm on the table, the way one steadies a child, then let go. The law firm in Lisbon sent confirmation, she said. I picked it up yesterday at the post office as we arranged. It's in the drawer. We'll sign where the arrow points. I know arrows, no Cyprio coupe. She smiled at my expression and translated gently, Don't worry. She knew I had understood anyway. In the drawer lay a serious envelope, stamped and signed, declaring in tidy Portuguese that a house is a house and a man has the right to decide about it. Beneath it, a single page named Anna Caretaker, authorized, to call electricians, masons, plumbers, and to pay them without my consent, without waiting for me to decide whether fixing what needed fixing was truly meant. In one corner of a photocopy, Helen's handwriting said simply, Trust her. Sit, Anna told me, placing a pen in my hand. I sat. I signed. It felt less like claiming and more like agreeing with a truth that had long been waiting for me. Now, she said, nodding toward the paperwork as if dismissing it to its proper place, you eat, and then you sleep. I'm not hungry, I answered. You are, she said, and carried from the kitchen a plate with bread that required no adjectives, and a small dish of oil, green with herbs and salt that lingered at the back of my teeth. I tore, dipped, ate, and realized I had been lying about hunger since Helen died. You rest, she said when the plate was light. Stay, I whispered, surprising both of us. She shook her head. I live 3 houses away. If I stay, I will tidy. And if I tidy, you will feel like you do not live here. From her sweater, she drew a small, indestructible phone and placed it on the table. This is the house phone. 4 numbers saved. Mine, the Lisbon office, the plumber, and the man who brings fish on Fridays. You will remember the fish. What about my American phone? I asked. She looked at me in a way that made me feel seen. Turn it off, she said softly. You need to be here to be here. After she left, I obeyed. I placed my American phone in the drawer beside the Lisbon envelope. Not punishment, but truce. I walked the rooms with the same quiet method I had once used in my American house. But this time, the walkthrough didn't ask what would stay or go. It asked what belonged. Helen would have loved that question. The bedroom faced a narrow street where the wind knew restraint. On the dresser, a bowl held 2 smooth stones the size of decisions. I tucked Emily's glittered Christmas star into the bowl's back, so its sparkle could misbehave quietly. In the bathroom, a window let the sea announce the hour. A towel hung, trusting the air. I placed my razor on the sink and thought of Helen's favorite sandalwood. I reminded myself to buy a bar in town, not to chase memory but because some memories deserve company. When sleep came, it came as Anna had promised. I woke to noon light and the sound of plates somewhere that weren't mine. I lay still, letting the strange familiarity of the ceiling draw a new map above me. The mattress forgave my age when I rose. The tiles were cool. The mirror met my face without accusation. I walked the path Anna had traced with her hand, past 3 houses unashamed of age. A woman beat dust from a rug with a rhythm that made sense. A cat withheld judgment. 2 boys chased a ball that had traveled farther than my truck. The market kept its promises. Bread that would never suffer plastic lay in paper sleeves. Olives gleamed like perfect punctuation in a shallow bin. A man behind the counter asked a question in Portuguese. I smiled in reply. He chose a loaf, handed it over like a handshake. Obrigado, I said, and he nodded, as if I had passed a small exam. Back at the house, I cut the bread with a knife that had learned partnership, not weaponry. I ate standing at the counter, because, New places ask you to stand before they let you sit. Later, I carried bread, a lemon, and 2 cups to the terrace, sat, and listened to the sea. That afternoon, Anna returned. She knocked with the patience of someone who understands doors. "You are awake," she said, approving as though I had learned to breathe on time. "I am," I replied. "Do you have time to tell me the story?" Helen had once said I owed her life for Anna's eyes. Those eyes did now what memory does when it insists without invitation. "I was 20, Anna began. "I thought I married a good man." She shrugged. "He was good at charming. That is different." I nodded. Life teaches that difference in its second half. When he left a mess. Not just money, paper, debts in my name. Lies that stuck. She leaned back. "Your wife came to the cafe where I worked and asked if I had a lawyer." I laughed. "A lawyer? For a girl serving coffee?" She looked at me as if I had insulted a friend. She said, "You have me." I told her I couldn't pay. She said, "Then you cut my hair." "I am not a hairdresser." Anna smiled at the absurd. Mercy of the past. She took me to the office in town, introduced me to a woman who could make paper behave. She sat with me while I signed, made her explain every line twice, wrote notes on the notes. "That sounds like her," I said. "She saved my name," Anna whispered, softer than before. "And when my mother was sick, your wife brought soup, made the bed, told my mother she needed practice helping before she could serve Americans properly. She gave dignity. That is more than money." Silence sat with us like a good neighbor. "When she asked me to keep this house ready," Anna said at last, "I promised, knowing what yes meant. I check shutters. Open windows after rain. Change sheets so the bed won't forget its work. It is not labor. It is—" She searched. "Guarding." "Thank you," I said, meaning it down to the bone. "We will go for dinner," she said, standing. "The cafe in the square. They know you as Helen's husband. You will correct them. You will say, 'I am Richard,' and then, 'I am Richard, who was Helen's husband.' Both truths fit." We walked to the square at the hour when the day forgives itself. Light touched wine glasses and conversation. The cafe tables held, people unhurried in their aliveness. Anna greeted the owner without reminding him of place. He brought soup that refused apology for its simplicity, and fish that humbled my mouth into silence. "Wine?" he asked. "Half," Anna said. "So you sleep." I slept anyway. That night I stood on the terrace making a ritual from nothing. I rolled a lemon under my palm until its scent lifted, pressed my fingertip into the rind until the air began to tell stories. Closing my eyes, I saw Helen seated where I stood, ankles crossed, a book in her lap she only pretended to read while watching people be human. I didn't speak to her. The sea spoke for both of us. The next morning, I woke early and followed the alley Anna had traced to the bakery. An old man set chairs out front with careful belief in the day, though he knew it still required proof. In the window, he placed pastel de nata, the custard glowing like sunlight that had finally agreed to behave. I bought 2, carried them home in a paper bag that whispered with each step, and ate them on the terrace with coffee that finally remembered its own flavor. Afterward, I wrote a letter to Emily I never meant to send. I'm learning the names of things that stay true to themselves, whether or not I pronounce them correctly. I told her about the cat 2 doors down who acts as if he owns the path, and about the neighbor who hangs laundry with a rhythm like a song you only notice if you're quiet. I told her the sea is louder at night but gentler by morning. I promised her a seat beside me if she ever wanted to test that theory herself. When the letter was done, I folded it and slid it under the bowl of lemons like ballast. There's a kind of defiance in writing what you never planned to mail. It makes you honest without demanding witnesses. By late morning, the village had learned me well enough to wave. The woman with the rug nodded with the respect you give the persistent. The boys with the ball folded me into the grammar of their game by pretending not to. Anna texted a single word: linens. I replied with a photo of the freshly made bed. We were learning from one another. That afternoon I called Peter on the house phone. International plans are for people who don't intend to return. Everything's in order, he said. Your porch has been quiet. Good, I told him. Let it stay that way. Shall I forward anything from the Children's Council? Yes, I answered. To my post office box, and to the Fishman on Friday. He laughed, the laugh of a man grateful to be included in a harmless joke. After we hung up, I switched on my American phone for the first time in 2 days. Messages flooded in like a weather report from another country. Mark, 3 texts, 2 voicemails. Laura, 1 text. Pie, Sunday. Then another, a day later. We came. You were gone. Emily, just a heart and a question mark. I wrote back only to her. I'm safe. I'm where your grandmother wanted me to be. When you're ready, I have a chair waiting. Then I put the phone away again. It could wait. Portugal waits well. At dusk, Anna appeared at the gate and leaned there as if a threshold were as good as a seat. Tomorrow, she said, market's in Lul. We buy bowls you don't need, but that will make soup taste like it belongs. I have a weakness for bowls, I admitted. You have a weakness for things that hold, she corrected. I let the truth of that land where it should. When she left, I did the chores that make a place yours. Rinsed dishes, wiped counters, shook crumbs into my palm, and fed them to the plants. At the sink, I looked out at the lemon tree someone had taught to stay tame, and thought of mine across the ocean, probably cursing the wind. There is pride in plants that learn to stay. There is pride, too, in men who learn to move. Before bed, I set Helen's photograph on the nightstand. It looked more at home there than it had anywhere else since she died. I turned off the light and listened to the sea. Sound can be both wall and door. I chose the door. In the morning, I would buy bowls and salt, and words for thank you that felt less like performance and more like agreement. I knew soon enough the American phone would ring with a call I'd answer, not out of duty, but because I'd decided my voice belonged in the conversation more than the silence did. For now, I let Portugal teach me the shape of a day that required no justification. I slept, and when I dreamed, the house didn't scold me for leaving the lights on. It simply held. The municipal hearing room smelled faintly of old varnish and recycled air, the kind of place where decisions that change lives are made without ceremony. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, tinting faces, wood panels, even the flag in the corner the same dull shade. I sat at the far end of the table, my hands resting on a manila folder that contained months of work, pages that could turn a lifetime of quiet humiliation into one final reckoning. Mark and Laura entered together, flanked by a lawyer I didn't recognize, a young man with immaculate hair, and the smug confidence of someone who still thought the world would bend if he smiled just right. Mark avoided my eyes, fussing with his tie the way he always had when lying as a boy. Laura, though, looked straight at me, less defiant now, more calculating, still measuring odds. Emily was there too, sitting quietly in the back row. She'd told me she didn't need to come, that she had exams. But when I heard my truck door slam that morning and saw her with her bag, I hadn't argued. Her steady, unblinking presence was the only warmth in the room. The council clerk called the meeting to order. Mr. Hale, the chair began, today we'll review the petition filed by your children regarding the transfer and sale of your property on Maple Lane. Transfer and sale. Words clean enough to disguise the truth. They wanted me gone. Not just from the house Helen and I had built, but from the last place where my life still felt mine. Mark's lawyer spoke first, all polished courtesy. He painted me as an aging father, struggling with the burdens of upkeep, while my children nobly stepped in for my protection. This isn't about taking anything away, he said smoothly. It's about safeguarding Mr. Hale's well-being. I let his words hang, heavy with false concern, then opened my folder and spread its contents across the table. Photographs, receipts, letters, even Helen's old ledgers, each page in her neat hand. Protecting my well-being? My voice was steady, almost mild. I've maintained that property without a mortgage for 6 years. Taxes paid, repairs handled, utilities current. But that's not the point. I slid one of Helen's letters forward. The point is, she owned more than a house, and she made her wishes clear. Mark frowned. Dad, what are you— I cut him off by pushing another document toward their lawyer. A notarized addendum to Helen's will. They'd never seen it. In it, she established a trust for Emily, secured not only by the house, but also the 2-acre lot I'd quietly purchased under a holding company after Helen's diagnosis. The property wasn't mine anymore. It wasn't theirs either. Laura's face drained. You can't just— I can, I said softly. And I did. You spoke of upkeep and taxes. You never once spoke of her garden, her lemon tree, her rosemary hedge. You saw square footage. We saw 25 years of our lives. The chair cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the personal turn. Given this documentation, the petition has no basis. He shut the file. The property is no longer subject to transfer. That was it. No gavel, no drama. Just the quiet collapse of their plan. Mark leaned back, staring at the ceiling, fighting composure. Laura clutched her purse. Their lawyer shuffled papers, avoiding my eyes. When it ended, I buttoned my jacket and stood. Emily rose without a word and fell in beside me. We walked out into the cool air, the flag snapping above us. "Grandpa?" she said as we reached the truck. "Yes, Em? You didn't have to tell them about the trust, did you?" I shook my head. "No, but sometimes people need to know exactly where they stand." She thought on that, then smiled faintly. "You're impossible to beat." I didn't answer. It wasn't about winning. It was about writing the last chapter myself, with Helen's hand still guiding mine. That night I sat at the kitchen table with my green mug. Steam rose from fresh coffee. Outside, the rosemary hedge stretched shadows across the stone path. Somewhere in the dark, I thought I could hear Helen's laughter. Not sharp like Mark's had grown, but warm, the way it used to be when the world was still ours. Tomorrow I would prune, water, tend. Not for them, not even for me, but for the promise we made, that it would never be left to strangers. Spring arrived in Portugal like a window pried open after years of paint. The morning stayed cool enough to make coffee feel like a kindness, but by noon the light stretched itself over stone, over lemon skin, over the restless face of the sea. I had learned the rhythms of the lane, the bakery doors swinging open at 7, the cat deciding which wall was his kingdom that day. Anna always knocked softly, with a precision that made bread she brought, though I never asked for it, feel ceremonial. Emily's flight touched down on a Thursday. I waited by the rail outside arrivals, holding a little sign Anna had insisted I make, because she believed the world deserved at least one formal gesture. At first I felt foolish. Then I saw Emily. Searching the crowd, her face lighting up the moment she spotted her name in my uneven block letters. She closed the distance in 3 hurried strides, the kind children make before they remember dignity. Her embrace was unhesitating, the kind that refuses to apologize for existing. "You're here," she whispered into my coat. "I am," I answered into her hair, which smelled citrus bright and entirely honest. "And so are you." Anna waited. In the short-term lot, engine off, elbow hooked out the window, as if she trusted time itself to behave. "Bem-vinda, menina," she said when Emily slid into the back seat, offering her hand like a queen knighting someone. Emily accepted with the ease of a person stepping into a place they'd always belonged. The drive from Faro felt like a long, quiet exhale. Emily absorbed everything the way I had my first day, though with more wonder and far less suspicion. Pointing. Now and then, her voice catching with a surprised, "Oh," whenever some ruin proved it could still stand. Anna narrated like a patient aunt. "Bread there, best fish here. Pharmacia, you won't need it." The tomato man isn't angry, only focused. When we turned down the lane with stone walls, Emily leaned her forehead to the glass. "It's like a movie," she said. Then corrected herself. "No, it's like what movies want to be." We pulled up in front of the White House with blue shutters, a house that still seemed to believe in itself. She stood in front of it, silent for several seconds before murmuring, "Grandma knew. She knew what you'd need." "She did," I told her, turning the brass key that felt less like a question than a sentence completed. Inside, the house welcomed her the way good houses do, by attending to what she noticed. She traced her fingers along the built-in shelves, pressed her palm to the cool tile, lingered at the terrace rail with the sea before her, eyes working in ways school never teaches. Anna, half in jest, set a bowl of lemons on the table. A joke. Now between us, Emily picked one up, rolling it beneath her palm until even the air joined the conversation. "Are we allowed to be this happy?" she asked without smirk or laugh to soften it. "Yes," I answered, and the completeness of the word startled me. "Yes, we are." Lunch was an attempt at restraint that failed beautifully. Bread that refused moderation, anchovies in oil, tasting of concentrated sun, olives that proved poems can be written about small things. Emily grimaced at her first sip of Vinho Verde, but 5 sips later, forgave it. Anna retold the story of Helen and the lawyer, this time for Emily, adding a new detail. After the papers were signed, Helen had insisted they get ice cream because paper should never be the last taste in your mouth when you change your name. "Of course she did," Emily said, eyes wet though no tears fell. She always made dignity feel touchable. That evening, we walked to the square. The cafe owner remembered me only as Helen's husband. I corrected him gently. "I am Richard, who was Helen's husband." Both truths fit without conflict. Emily ate her first pastel de nata, like she was teaching her body what sweetness should mean, even dabbing custard on my nose. I let her. Some rules aren't worth keeping when joy enters the room. Later, when the village sank into clinks and soft laughter, Emily stood beside me on the terrace, watching the sea gather itself. "Mom called," she said, eyes still forward. "She said she's sorry. For all of it." "Sorry works better before the wreckage," I told her. "Not after." She inhaled slowly. Still, I believed her. "She loves you," I said. "I know?" She didn't pretend the words solved anything. She asked if I'd come home after break. I told her I might not. That I'm thinking about a semester here. Lisbon has a program. Faro, too. And She cut herself off, laughed, at her own eagerness. "Listen to me. I don't even know the word for salt yet, and I'm planning a life. Salt is sal," I said. "And life is sal too sometimes." She nudged me with her shoulder. "Grandpa." "I know. Do it. No need to think anymore. You've been thinking for months without realizing it. This is the time for doing." Her head dipped in agreement as though her neck had been waiting for that permission. "There's something else," she said more softly. "The money you've been sending. I want to use it for this. Not Cancun, not sorority dues. For Lisbon. For language. For bowls I don't even need." "Use it," I said. "For bowls that end up holding something you do need." That night she fell asleep on Portugal's rhythm, as if she had been born to it. I stayed up, opened the bottom drawer where the Lisbon envelope lived, and beside it, a thinner envelope I hadn't yet shared. I'd been saving it for a time when giving wouldn't be about adrenaline or proving anything. Now felt right. In the morning, over coffee, I set the envelope on the table between Emily and the lemons. "What's this?" she asked, wary of gifts. That bite. A portfolio, I told her. Municipal bonds. Laddered maturities. In your name, since the month after your grandmother's diagnosis. Reliable, dull, like your grandfather. Built for a future whose shape we couldn't yet imagine. Maybe now we can. Her eyes widened, narrowed, widened again. The way people measure the future's weight against their knees. You set this up for me? Your grandmother did, I said. I handled the paperwork. She did the part that mattered. Emily reached, then pulled back. What's the catch? 3 catches, I said. Because catches keep love from softening people too much. 1. Don't spend a cent rescuing your parents from fires they built. Not because we don't love them, but because fire teaches. 2. Use it for learning, for showing up where your life is, not for buying silence when noise is the better teacher. 3. Never tell the number. Just say enough and let that be the math. She nodded, voice already breaking. I won't tell. Except maybe Mom someday, when she's earned it. That's fair, I said. After breakfast we went to the fishmonger. Emily tried her Portuguese, and he met her halfway out of respect. He called her Menina, with that fatherly laugh Portuguese men seem born with, and she laughed too, knowing how to accept kindness without debt. We bought lemons we didn't need, part of my brand now. On our way back, Anna intercepted us with a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine that begged to be opened. For the girl, she said. From your Helen. She gave it, to me for her. But only when I believed you, Señor, had arrived in your own life. Emily held the parcel as if unsure whether it obeyed physics. We set it on the table, untied the twine. Inside, a slim notebook, Helen's favorite kind. The paper strong enough for both pencil and ink. On the first page, her square handwriting, precise enough to make grocery lists look like affidavits. Emily, if Anna has handed you this, it means your grandfather has done something brave. Brave usually looks boring. Papers, keys, saying no, when people want yes. Brave also looks like your face, and the faces of the women before you who wore stubbornness as a virtue when it served love. I came to this house once, after my diagnosis, before I told anyone. I sat where you sit and watched the sea. I didn't feel sad. I felt relief, not for leaving, but for knowing I'd built a life that could be handed over without guilt. If you are here, you are ready to keep what matters. My only instruction, don't let the people who love you most be the ones who make you smallest. And roll lemons before cutting. It loosens them, like people. Love, Grandma Helen. Emily turned the notebook in both hands, as though a second note might be hidden beneath. There wasn't. She stepped onto the terrace, her back to me, letting joy break open what needed breaking inside her. When she returned, she didn't offer me the notebook again. She slid it into her backpack, next to her passport. That, too, felt right. We fried the fish for lunch and ate it with bread, pouring out a chilled bottle of something white that Anna swore could make even mistakes look stylish. Instead, it made the good choices sink more comfortably into our bones. Conversation drifted to school, not classes or exams, but the act of learning itself. Emily confessed she wanted to become someone who could separate praise from purpose. I admitted I wanted the same. By late afternoon, Anna insisted we call Laura on the house phone. That's what houses are for, she said. Laura's face filled the screen, carrying a plainness I hadn't seen since she was 19, truth stripped of performance. Are you okay? She asked, meaning me, not the house. I am, I answered. And so is your daughter. She nodded, tears unhidden, which made me love her harder and forgive her all at once. I'm trying, she whispered. It shouldn't have taken this, but I am. Then you'll have to practice, I told her, like piano. She laughed through hiccups. You sent me my piano books just to say that, didn't you? I did, she began, stumbled, and started again. May I come? Not yet. Later. When I ask you, she agreed. We hung up before gratitude turned into performance. Emily laid her head on the table like someone finally allowed to set down a heavy weight. That was good, she murmured. Hard, but good. Most good things are like that, I said. If it's easy, it's cake. She grinned. Cake's good too, because 20-year-olds have a gift for softening seriousness. Then she added, but pie is better. Pie is patience. I told her, pie belongs to Sundays. We didn't call Mark. That wasn't punishment. It was simply the weather. On Sunday I sent him a picture of a lemon pie on a plate, fork beside it, and wrote, Pie, next month. Sunday, 2 hours. If you come to talk square footage, you eat on the porch. He replied with a single K, the modern way of saying I hear you, and I dislike everything you stand for, which was, in its own way, a beginning. The final tasks were businesslike. I spoke with Peter about naming Portugal as my primary residence, turning the American house into a life estate, and putting a conservation easement on Helen's garden so it would be protected by law, not argument. He asked what to call it. I said, the Helen Hale Garden Covenant. He hummed in approval, the sound of a man grateful for a label that won't embarrass a certificate. We reviewed beneficiaries, medical directives, and the fine print that later becomes courtroom exhibits when families forget how to act like families. My hand didn't shake as I signed. He stamped and scanned, and we both let the paper do the rare work of protecting instead of taking. Anna learned to knock once and announce herself. Anna! As she came through. She brought bowls from the market, though I didn't need them for the soup to taste like it belonged here. Emily learned the shortcut to the square, the name of the fishmonger's dog, and how to ask for things without apologizing for wanting them. She flew back to the States for 3 weeks to finalize her leave of absence, then returned with a carry-on and a face that said she had packed exactly the right amount of herself. This time, Laura came to the American on house only once, leaving flowers in a vase with a card that read, I am practicing. Mark sent no flowers, but he began sending photographs, pie from diners, pie at home, pie that looked like effort. On the 3rd week, a picture of his hand fixing a cabinet hinge, blurred, imperfect, perfect. One evening after dinner, Emily opened Helen's notebook, not the letter that she kept private, but the back pages filled with small instructions written as though whispered to a granddaughter at a sleepover Helen had always longed to host. Don't buy shoes that apologize for your life. If a man raises his voice to prove a point, tell him his point is lonely. Plant rosemary where you'll brush it by accident. It will remind you to use your hands. When you let someone love you, make them learn your grandparents' names. Emily closed the book and looked at me with Helen's eyes and her own. She knew me without fully knowing me. I pay attention, she said. Paying attention, I told her, is the kindest form of love I know. We sat in the quiet that is not the same as silence. Then she stood, fetched a lemon and a knife, rolled it under her palm the way the note instructed, sliced, and the air responded the way air does when given a story. I'm staying, she said. A semester, maybe longer. Not running away. Running. Toward. Mom cried when I told her. She said she wants to visit and see what I see. I said, maybe later. Later's a good word, I told her. It's honest. It gives room for people to earn. And Mark? She asked. He'll come for pie, first on the porch, then at the table, and maybe, one day, without an agenda. Time will be the lawyer for that part. Anna knocked once. Anna! And placed a plate between us. 3 cookies dusted like stars across a clear night. Dessert, she said, as though we'd earned it. We have, Emily answered. We told the truth. And, Anna added. We didn't turn the truth into theater. That's better. We ate the cookies without ceremony. Emily yawned, graceful as she had been at 5, drifting to sleep in my back seat after fireworks. She kissed my cheek, went to bed. Anna stayed, and we watched the sea darken in patches like a dog settling for the night. I think, Anna said at last, you're no longer a man arriving. You are a man who has arrived. That feels right, I answered. Less like landing, more like setting something heavy down. She nodded. Tomorrow we'll go to Lule and buy a bowl you don't need. I need bowls that hold, I told her. She smiled as if I'd placed a sentence exactly where it belonged. Before bed, I wrote 3 letters. One to Peter, with instructions. To file the garden covenant and thanks for being the kind of man who keeps paper from hurting people. Another to Joyce, the neighbor, for watering the basil and for asking after me without turning my answers into tests. And one to Helen, not because I believe the post office serves her address, but because writing to her makes me pay attention to my words. I told her Emily rolled a lemon without prompting. Laura used the word practice and meant it. Mark fixed a hinge and showed me a better pride than any large check. I told her I had learned which things were worth boredom and which worth excitement, and that this is what wisdom sounds like. I signed only my name, not ours, and did not feel unfaithful. Love that asks you to shrink is not love. She taught me that. She wrote it in a note that started a plan and ended the war I'd been fighting against myself for years. At dawn, I stood on the terrace with coffee in a mug Emily bought that says ooh in a font that looks ready to tell a joke. The sea pushed and pulled, pretending it had somewhere better to be. I laid my palm flat on the table, felt the stone rise to meet it, and remembered. The morning Mark told me my life was too big. The blue folder, Peter's letters, Anna's trust, Emily's shoulder against mine, Laura's box, pie, sundaes, lemons, and the rosemary I planted without bitterness where my wife had chosen. That was justice in my hands. Not a gavel, not a sword, not fireworks, but weight finely distributed correctly. A life that fit. When Emily woke, she brought Helen's notebook and 2 pens. Teach me how you make lists, she said. There's no right way, I told her. Only the way that keeps you honest. Then show me that way, she said, pressing a pen into my hand like a daughter sliding a permission slip across the table. On a clean page, I wrote, what we keep, what we let go, what we build. She nodded as though she already knew the answers, only needed somewhere to put them. We began with small things. Bread, bowls, rosemary, language, sundaes, pie. Then grew braver. Pride, permission, dignity, distance, money, and what it isn't. By noon, the page was full. Lemons needed rolling again. The cat had claimed our wall as his kingdom. The fishmonger waved like we belonged even if our pronunciation didn't. And the sea continued its old trick of being enough without explanation. When the shadows stretched long, Emily tucked the notebook into her bag and said, let's go buy bowls we don't need. Let's, I replied. We walked the lane past houses that had outlasted everything thrown at them. We didn't hurry. There was no reason to anymore.